We are back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the NBA action that I have watched recently. So to get straight into it, I'll cap off the Cup coverage with the NBA Cup final, even though I am absolutely late to it. But to be honest, just like the semifinal match that involved the Spurs and the Thunder, this one was also a game that went way, way down to the wire, and it all came down to the unlikely players. Now, both teams were definitely going at it the entire time, and you definitely had the stars come out to play, including Wembanyama off the bench, including Brunson as a starter. But you still had to have other people in the court playing around that. And in that, you got good work off the bench from both Dylan Harper of the Spurs and also, surprisingly, Tyler Kolek of the Knicks. Harper has continued to excel this season, to be honest with you. Now, yes, he had recently been coming off an injury, and there were moments in this game where he would settle for a few shots, and I'm like, okay, does he really have any business taking that? I'm not incredibly sure. But as the Spurs were starting to make their run later on in the game, he was a core centerpiece of making that happen. Whether it was him just being composed, slashing directly to the rim against better defenders, way better defenders than he's probably had to deal with in his entire career to this point, or even hitting a few threes, which has been a rarity for his shot selection this season. That was definitely something that impressed me. But the Knicks also, with Tyler Kolek amongst other players too, not to mention, he definitely deserves a lot of credit too. The Knicks have been trying tremendously hard throughout the course of the offseason to find a point guard that can take the pressure off of Brunson to allow him to rest up and conserve him for moments in the clutch. Now, they went out in the offseason and got Malcolm Brogdon, which at the time made perfect sense to me. I thought that would have been a great piece to have off the bench, only he retired. And at that moment, I don't really know if they could pivot directly. They had to look from within, I suppose, to find a solution there. Now, Kolek was drafted last year. He was actually the Blazers pick, and he was traded to, or his draft rights, I should say, were traded to the Knicks. And I don't know, it's been a struggle for him for a little bit. He'd gotten some time in the G League last season and has definitely stayed on the active roster this season for most of the year. But over the last few games, even with Knicks games that I haven't been tuned into like that, he's been putting together some solid performances off the bench. Even in the game after this, he would go on to have 16 points and 11 assists off the bench. But as far as this game goes, I don't know, you wouldn't expect him to constantly be moving around in the way that he does. But there were cases where he was getting active on defense, to be honest with you. The Spurs promptly tried to pick on him consistently, and while they did have success at that, it wasn't made as easy for them as they would have thought. Not to mention, too, the offensive chemistry would be even greater than you'd expect. Because as far as this game goes, Kolek was actually put on the lineup in tandem with Jalen Brunson at the same time. And, the goal would be to watch Jalen Brunson at all times, but with Tyler Kolek handling the basketball, well, the Spurs can't just sit blindly away from him and not account for the man with the ball in his hands at the moment. Now, I would be a little weird at first because you're not accustomed to seeing Jalen Brunson come off the ball normally. But once they got set and once they were honed in enough on Kolek, they'd give it to Brunson and he would just go to work from there. That was just kind of the theme of the whole game. It's just having some of the unlikeliest players on both sides step up. But it also came down to just overall strength. And the Knicks, once again, are the byproduct of a win that sees them control the glass a little more and dominate in the paint. Like, Though this might not mean a lot, but the fact that they took 6 extra shots in this game and shot better from the field and were able to have an advantage of 17 in total boards. That is the calling card for this team. And you had everybody getting after it on there. It wasn't just Karl-Anthony Towns or Mitchell Robinson, too. Like, you had a sequence alone later on in the fourth quarter where Jordan Clarkson was the recipient of 6 fourth quarter points just like that off of broken down coverages as a result of the failure to secure rebounds on that front. That kind of stuff you just can't make up. And this late Knicks run would be spurred by that. I mean, they had an 18-5 run, for crying out loud, to try to put the game away and create a little bit of distance. At least the Spurs would start to settle back in eventually due to the contributions of Stephon Castle, who was also just, his game was a little interesting. Like, for a while there in the first quarter, he didn't even take a shot, but he already had 4 assists. Now, coming into the game, it was mentioned that this man, Stephon Castle, in just his second year, is already on tremendous pace. The only 2 players to average 18 points per game and 6 assists per game on 50% shooting or better at the age of 21 or younger are him and Magic Johnson from 1979 to 1981. Anytime you are in a conversation with him, you are doing something right. And to be in that kind of conversation this early on, while also playing a different style of basketball than Magic Johnson played, it's actually crazy to see. Like, Stephon Castle, honestly, the numbers won't show it, but for most of this game, he played well. I don't really care about him shooting 5 of 15 from the field, even though that did come to bite them in the ass by the end of the game. But he also managed to be as effective as possible. And even though his shots didn't always go in, he was taking the right shots. He was actually taking the right shots. Like, his first attempt or something, I believe, was just an unlucky miss around the rim that actually had a great chance of being made. Very high percentage look. Now, and, as they accumulate, you got to have those. But to miss those is always a tough thing. You're not going to make them all. And he was mostly efficient with the basketball, too. He also had 12 assists in this game with just 2 turnovers and 7 boards on the night. Like, that was tremendous on his end. And even though it got away from them at points, his contributions alone allowed them to remain in the game, especially with a team that just generally struggled to get much going at different points in the game. It was mostly even otherwise, but when it came down to it, again, you're stealing all these extra possessions like that. Ultimately, that's going to lead to more points for the Knicks. That is their identity in a nutshell. And also, man, OG Anunoby, I don't know if he gets enough credit from other people that are not Knicks fans. It's like they just kind of look at his contract and they think it's an albatross because of their belief, for whatever reason, that he's limited in what he can do. And maybe that's the case to an extent. I mean, by nature, he's going to be a 3-and-D player. You're not asking him to do a whole hell of a lot more than that, but god damn it, he can do that job pretty fucking well. And his on-ball pressure in this game, his ability to convert and transition alone. I think that there was a stat line at halftime stating that he had accounted for 20 points at that point. 10 points in the first and second quarter with only like 3.5% of the team's dribbles in this game, or contributing to just 3.5% of the team's dribbles. So he was actively picking pockets, getting out in transition, and just constantly moving the rock. Or when it came to other people, shockingly enough, he didn't even have a steal in this game. But you know what he did? As soon as possession turned, or flipped in some way off a rebound, off a steal from a different player, they found his ass wide open. Because he was, while everybody else was just napping on defense, he was actively streaking down the fucking court, trying to make something happen and set up some high percentage looks without a set defense in play. And that kind of effort allowed the Knicks to ultimately push through. It's not all about numbers with a team that legitimately wants to grind it out relentlessly. Every single player on this court, even the one steal, the one stat that Ariel Huporti had, because he didn't play all that much in this game, and frankly, you're not going to put him in a high-stakes situation like that. But even he was hustling his ass off, scrambling down to the ground, getting a steal, and getting the ball out to Jalen Brunson to eventually kick it out to a wide-open Anunoby. Like, you can't measure that kind of hustle in a team. You can't measure that kind of heart in a team. Some of the assists overall for both squads were just great. Not only were Castle and Fox at a point having a total of 16 assists with just 3 turnovers, but you also had the Knicks pull out some of their own stats as well. Karl-Anthony Towns had a fucking nasty zip pass all the way over to the other side on the wing for a made shot. And I'm like, you have Wemby guarding you at that point. He manages to get it right past his torso with just some of the filthiest velocity imaginable. And I'm like, how the fuck did he pull that off? And then you also had Jalen Brunson no-looking some shit, perfectly distracting the defense at points to get open looks in the paint. One of Kolek's buckets were literally the easiest he'll find ever. You have all of these other defenders focused on Brunson at that point, and Tyler Kolek's just sitting wide open in the paint, literally facing Brunson at that point. Nobody's watching him, which again makes sense, especially when he gets near the post, right? But he did enough to lull them to sleep and just unloaded enough on the pass to Kolek to get him an uncontested and wide open layup for what would be eventually 6 fourth quarter points for the man. Key for San Antonio as well. They were in it and they were able to battle back slightly, but they came into the fourth quarter with a little bit of a lead. They had established some great flow in their game, especially with Wembanyama starting to take over. He would definitely struggle for a little bit of time. He didn't have the same impact in terms of box plus minus off the bench, but in that third quarter, he definitely started to heat up and find his shot. Like, he was getting fucking fading trays over Jordan Clarkson and shit, doing every single thing that you would probably expect Wembanyama to do at that point, because he's just on a completely different level for 12 third quarter points. But the team as a whole struggled to find their shot in the fourth. And this stat line would be damning just as well. Like, they shot 4 of 17 in the fourth quarter as a team. And while, again, you can also credit the Knicks defense for playing them tough throughout the course of the game, you can't excuse something like that happening down the stretch. You gotta finish a game strong, as strong as you possibly can, especially against this kind of Knicks team. They ended up making too many mistakes to where they weren't able to overcome them at all. They got close, but we know where the championship mindset is for the Knicks. You understand that. You can't try to just have all these different lapses. because they're more than likely going to make you pay on that front. So that's definitely tough. Also, there was a press conference going around, and Wembanyama mentioned that he lost one of his family members at that point, his grandmother, which I had no idea about at that point. I think, if anything, that just goes to show you that you truly don't know what people are going through in that time. It's still been some days after that, and I'm sure it's something that is still processing for him. So, it's just incredibly unfortunate, and you definitely hope that he and his family can somehow, some way, continue to go through the motion. It's not something that is going to leave them. I mean, you saw it right in that moment with Victor. So it's not going to be easy to just let that pass, of course. But, man, you really hope that all is well for them and that they can move forward in the best and most graceful way they possibly can in this point of time. Yeah, that's definitely not something that one would have expected. But that's why it always pays to just let things develop as they might. People were just so quick to assume different things at that point without having the context. I held off and genuinely did not have an idea that happened. I mean, the fact that he even played the game in those circumstances, not to be that kind of guy, right? But that certainly takes a whole hell of a lot of guts to go through, try to deal with in the moment, and still actively try to do that in real time. Man, it's crazy for OG Anunoby, though. He literally led all scorers with 28 points on 10 of 17 shooting with 5 threes in the game. Not to mention 9 rebounds and 3 assists. Shockingly enough, it was Jalen Brunson to win the NBA Cup final MVP, which, if we're just basing it off that game, it felt more like OG Anunoby had a much better impact. That's just me, personally. Even more hilarious is that, per Shams Charania, I don't even know why this was a report. The Knicks would make it clear that they were not hanging up a banner for this. And it's like, I kind of get it from their perspective. I've also gotten an understanding of the other side of things. Whether it's been me watching other videos about it going down or watching some of the sports shows and things like that and having people talking about it. On the one hand, you want to reserve that for the actual thing. At the same time, the Lakers and Bucks, who have been franchises in similar realms. The Lakers are one of the most accomplished teams in the league in terms of championships, and they still decided to hang it up. It does represent history, even if it is something that isn't truly respected yet. It's definitely added more fire to some of these teams early in the season. You can't not just give that some merit. You have to be willing to embrace that. At the end of the day, you went through it. You went through the whole process, and you ended up, even Mike Brown said it essentially, they were the last team standing. He actually, as the ceremony was going down, he said something about having a chance to hang a banner in the rafters. And then they promptly the next day decide, oh, you know what, we're not going to do that. So it's like there was just a general disconnect there. Obviously, the goal for Mike Brown was to go out there and win a championship. That's why he's here. That's why the Knicks brought him in, because they believed that he could take them over the top. We understand that, but it's like, damn, if you have him still going out of his way to say that they would have the banner up, how the fuck does that make him look if literally just the next day, a few hours later, you let it be known that you're not doing that under any circumstances? That is kind of fucking crazy. Real stuff. Real stuff, man. But to move into the next action that I watched, this time being on Friday, in between the Thunder and the Timberwolves. And boy, let me just say that every single time last season that this game was played, you got great basketball, especially in the regular season. The playoffs, do we want to talk about the playoffs? Do we want to talk about the Western Conference Finals? Timberwolves fans, I don't know about that. But what I do know is that as far as this game goes, that shit did not disappoint at all. Not at all. Now, the Thunder, with what I failed to watch, I got put into this at pretty much like the first few minutes of the second quarter. So I missed some action. Essentially, we know the Thunder started out pretty hot in this game. That's how it typically goes. But they started to cool down. And in fact, it was mentioned that the 18-point output that they had in the second quarter was one of their lowest marks all season long. And that was for great reason. I think this just showed a lot about what it takes to beat this Thunder squad. And I gotta start, yes, we'll eventually get to the fact that Anthony Edwards is still a guy that deserves the utmost faith from their team as a player. But hear me out for just a second. Because as far as it goes, if we're trying to approach this from a full retrospective mindset, Bones Hyland was actually one of the most important players in this game. Can you believe that? Bones Hyland. The Bones Hyland. People were probably still confused about his being a Timberwolf in the first place. And even I initially was like, okay, when the fuck did he get here? I had no idea. Right? Man, the dude legitimately could not miss from deep. And in cases where even when Anthony Edwards is on the court at a point, they had that man spacing out and cashing in threes. But obviously, to just look at that would be failing to do him justice at all. There were some situations where his ass was literally getting in the paint and trying to get boards against bigger defenders. Literally. You have him trying to go to battle against Hartenstein, one of the better rebounders at his position, in the paint. And somehow, some way, he comes away with the basketball and he actively contributes to a second chance opportunity, which would be very huge overall for the Timberwolves, by the way. Neither team shot particularly great in this game, but when it came to second chance opportunities at a point, the Timberwolves had like a 16-3 advantage or something of that nature. And while they would be on the back end for a while, it really was a situation where they were constantly battling back. They didn't have the lead in this game for a while, but they were keeping it close. They were keeping it competitive, despite Julius Randle also just being incredibly trash from the field overall. And it was because of efforts like Highlands that they were able to stay alive. Even Dante DiVincenzo literally just started out the third quarter. After this 15-4 Wolves run in the second quarter, he had a stretch where he just started to get himself wide open from three and contributed to, I think it was 10 points at that point. Literally getting an and one, just fading back from the three-point line and just chilling down on the ground, staring at the camera, because, hey, that's what he does. One thing I could say as well is that, I don't know, it's pretty interesting. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is naturally going to have himself masterclasses in the NBA landscape. It's no secret. With this game, he actively extended his streak of 20-point games as he just gets closer and closer and closer to inevitably catching up to a Wilt Chamberlain record. And he would definitely go off for 30 plus in this game. We know where he's going to do most of his damage at this point, even though in some unconventional ways, he'll embellish. He will embellish. This sequence, I'm not gonna lie to you. Where did I note this? Because, man, hold on. Just make sure I have this. Yeah, this shit right here, depends on where they call this. But essentially, yeah, here we go. So, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, off of a defensive masterclass from that unit, which is not atypical for them, given the course of their progression over the last 3 seasons as a squad, right? He gets out in transition, and he has a clear path to the basket. Now, Anthony Edwards did clearly push him in the back, so that would probably be a foul. And it was correctly called that way. It's just that the extra shit took me out. This nigga, okay, he gets hit and has no reaction to it initially. There's about a 2 or 3 second delay, and then he decides to, he literally gives you the most expressed face for absolutely no reason as he cocks his body back to sell the call. I swear to you, as you slowed it down repeatedly, the man damn near buckled his own fucking knee just to sell the call. And I'm like, okay, cool, yes, you got fouled. But at that point, man, why all the extra shit, bro? Why all the extra stuff like that? That is absolutely insane. In all seriousness, though, the three-pointer for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this season, he's attempting to shoot it at a way higher rate than he probably ever has. One of his metrics last season was that he had, the highest amount of points off, two-pointers, especially in the high-scoring season that he had. And I don't think that's going to change necessarily, but he didn't shoot that bad from deep in this game, comparative to everybody else, which is where one of the struggles from the Thunder kicked in here. And that is also not atypical for them. Again, they can overcome this normally. That's just how great of a team they are, but it's no secret that they've had issues when it comes to spacing from three in multiple games, man. And again, in a game where neither team shot incredibly well, by nature, they were able to get to the free throw line and do great from there in terms of range, but also shot 28% from three. Isaiah Joe had a few makes, and Alex Caruso, amongst others, Lou Dort also, they'd have great looks for a while, they still managed to have a 16-3 run at some point in the third quarter because of the mere fact that they were getting out in transition and getting defensive stops. Cason Wallace is a menace, by the way, and he'll be important later, but in the moment, he was actively picking their pockets, man. Like one of the best perimeter defenders in the league for a reason. And they mentioned how he had a career high in a game, and you actively have him hounding people down for the ball, getting it back, and setting up the Thunder offense well. He did have a sequence that ended up being tough, as Naz Reid would be very interesting parallel to LeBron James in that moment, chasing his ass down and blocking it on the back rim. But still, that puts pressure on Minnesota. And it got to a point where on one of the possessions, you have Anthony Edwards trying to play iso ball on him. And ultimately, as he's guarding him the whole time, Edwards has to pass out of that shot. And that's interesting. You never see that from Anthony Edwards at that point. Especially against single coverage, he's going to want the ball in his hands. He didn't do anything on that possession. And that was the thing for Anthony Edwards too. Eventually, he was able to overcome it, but there are still issues with him being able to solve the double team problem. And again, it hurt them so badly as a squad in the playoffs. They were on that shit time and again, and Anthony Edwards was held to doing virtually nothing the entire series. So they tried to implement that same game plan in this one. And, with the way, the physicality that they were imposing, and also some of the calls that they were getting, it got to a point where Finch got ejected early in this game before I even saw that happen. But yeah, no, Edwards would eventually be able to overcome that in the greatest way imaginable. The fourth quarter was absolute chaos, especially in clutch time. Like, the defenses, both of these defenses, are still, to this point, some of the strongest in the league. And you would get that on full display, man, at a time. Like, the amount of fucking blocks in this, man, were just insane. Especially when you get to the last few possessions. I mean, bruh, literally, as I noted, there was a time where you had Naz Reid block the shit out of SGA. You had Luguentz Dort block the shit out of McDaniels to get the ball back. And then, to my surprise, you had Rob Dillingham, yes, that Rob Dillingham, block a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander shot. Normally, that would be a freebie on Rob Dillingham. How the fuck did he manage to make that happen? I'm not sure. But in all seriousness, again, that's another key to beating the Thunder, is that you have to have other players step up. And I'm not going to lie, for a much maligned player, typically, Rob Dillingham was another one of those players for this Minnesota team. We mentioned Highland earlier and how he got it done with his scoring. And I'm not going to lie, Robert Dillingham did not have the greatest shooting game in the world. He just didn't. I will say, though, that as they settled him down a little bit, some of the shots he was able to get did look good. He got a nice attempt to do something at the rim, but he hesitated. Like, literally, as you had a contest from Jaylin Williams here, he was in between dunking the ball and laying it up. And you gotta have a purpose when you are going to the fucking rack. If you are that indecisive, it's not going to end well. Now, that is something he could learn with time, but that is what resulted in that miss. There are some you definitely have to have, though. He had a different situation where he was coming off a pick and roll, got a nice attempt at essentially the free throw line, and just cranked it off the back rim. But, if he can continue to settle in that, like, those have a much better chance of going down in time. So it wasn't all bad for Dillingham from that front. But that kind of defense right there in that situation for a player who isn't really known for that, for a player who would normally get picked on due to his lack of size, to implement that shows you the kinds of influence that the Minnesota squad can have on him if they continue to be consistent with it. There's got to be consistency there. And that's kind of the struggle of it. You traded for him in his draft rights. But, having him sit around and rot on the bench isn't going to help his development, even though he has not had the cleanest start to his NBA career. You've got to let him get out there. You've got to allow him to make mistakes and not be punished for them all the damn time. You've got to be able to allow him to build trust in his teammates and have his teammates do the same for him, even when he may mess up. And you got flashes of that down the stretch of this game. The defense continued to be tight, though, and ultimately it came down to just having timely plays. Like Rob Dillingham, for example, would also, after that alone, get out in a transition, run, and find Rudy Gobert on an alley-oop to tie up the ball game. Take even more of a lead at that point. They started to get their control. We know about OKC, though. Ultimately, they would go on a 12-3 run after all of this. And this is at, right in the heart of clutch time. But, man, ultimately, with all that in mind, and with having other players take the burden off for a while, it would be Anthony Edwards' turn to ultimately make his mark on this game. Now, Minnesota had been keeping it a one-possession game the whole way with a few good looks, but it would be Anthony Edwards to completely take it over. Because for yet another time in this game, he would take it straight to Cason Wallace. He got the coverage he wanted. He wanted the ISO ball, and he got the nasty step-back tray over Cason Wallace to force the timeout and give Minnesota the 1-point lead at that point. I think in the postgame, he mentioned essentially how he wanted the Timberwolves defense at a point to blitz, not necessarily blitz, but send as many bodies towards Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as the Thunder were sending towards him. And, I mean, that's fair. That's superstar treatment in a nutshell. And you have to give that respect to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because if you don't, he will make you pay. Promptly, we all knew, everybody in that arena knew, in Minnesota, who was getting the fucking ball. And lo and behold, it was SGA. Only every single person, damn near every person, was so zoned in on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that you did see Anthony Edwards get the clutch block on him, but you also saw everybody else swarming behind the man, trying to swat the fucking basketball. And that would prove to be a little chaotic, because the Thunder would actually get the offensive rebound. And at that point, you had different people out of position. J-Dub was actually able to take a three-point shot that looked to be fairly open, but would miss, which had been, again, a struggle for them the entire night. That can't be a surprise, but that's a shot you're definitely going to want to have back if you're him. Even after all of that, it's still a 3-point ball game, and Anthony Edwards would manage to get the clutch steal on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, again, rewarding all the faith that the Timberwolves had in him, as they would pull out a 112-107 win. Again, I'm not going to try to sound like a broken record here, but again, man, it has to take so much out of you to beat this Thunder squad. You have to pull out all the stops that you can. You have to play a fairly smart brand of basketball, and you've got to match that physicality. And what makes this matchup so great, what made the projection, the idea of that conference final series last year so great, is that they can go toe-to-toe. with them. Like, maybe not in terms of talent level between some of the bench pieces that the Thunder have and some of the bench pieces that the Timberwolves have at this point. I don't think we can say that the Timberwolves have that same kind of portability with every single man on their roster through, in terms of 1 through 15. That might not be true. But when it comes to how they play traditionally and how they play against each other, they are the perfect matchup. Simply put. And the Timberwolves, through all of those things that I noted, were able to get the better of them here. Because otherwise, this game was relatively even. The Thunder were not able to get as stark of an advantage in transition as you would think. They only had a difference of 5 in terms of fast break points, a difference of 6 in points off turnovers. That's not that bad. And in fact, key thing to note here, the turnovers weren't that far out of proportion either. The Thunder are used to turning you over and scoring on their end, but they also play a much cleaner brand of offense. Yet in this game, turnovers came down to 11 to 13. It's not traditional for the Thunder. And again, with the way the Timberwolves play their defense as well, that's to be expected. And I don't know if OKC was necessarily thinking that that was going to happen. If you look at it from the Timberwolves' perspective, things went great for them all around. Of course, Anthony Edwards led the way with 26 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks even, on a night of 20 shooting with 3 threes. But even then, man, like it was a little touch and go elsewhere. You have to credit DiVincenzo and Reed for accounting for 15 points, with DiVincenzo having 4 threes. Julius Randle fucking ate up the free throw line, man. He had 19 points on 3 of 15 shooting, but made 12 threes, and also had 8 rebounds and 5 assists. Rudy Gobert is also an interesting case. He had 9 points and 14 rebounds. In fact, this is going to be pretty interesting. So they mentioned the graphic as soon as I got into this game. At the point, his 122 games with at least 15 rebounds since 2020 is the most in the league, or maybe the second most behind Jokic. No, the most. Jokic is second with like 108. And I tell you, that makes sense. But at the same time, what you gonna do with those rebounds? This man might legitimately, and we know this already, the nigga is an offensive black hole. Can we just be honest about that for a second? Because even with you getting 9 points, this nigga shot 3 of 7 at the rim. There was a sequence, okay? Because I need you to understand this and put this in context, bro. In fact, there were multiple sequences. This first one came towards the tail end of the second quarter. Now, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was a hell of a dog on defense on this possession, because Jaden McDaniels, was driving in, and he was trying to go for a layup, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander blocked the fuck out of him. Okay, fair enough. You got the one up there. The ball somehow gets in Rudy Gobert's hands, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander blocks him. Okay. He gets the ball back yet again, and what he proceeds to do next should warrant a fucking criminal charge. Because this nigga, we know how tall this man is. His ass gets up for his signature move as a guy who had been the league leader in dunks for years, especially off pick and rolls. This nigga puts it back up and literally misses the fucking dunk as the ball ricochets all the way over to the corner for a Thunder player to go get it. You can't make that shit up. Even worse, later in the game. Later in the same game we're talking about now. At a pivotal moment, this nigga tries to dunk the ball and hits the front of the rim. And at that point, I'm done. It's like, what the hell is it going to take? What the hell is it going to take, man? You were never expecting that from Rudy Gobert in terms of being this world-beating offensive mastermind. But I mean, damn, nigga, you have... Like, that should be money for you. And you are actively missing in some of the most head-scratching ways imaginable. Like, come on, man. That shit, you cannot have that. You can't have it. Man, goodness gracious, though. But yeah, strong win for the Timberwolves, despite the fact that from the free throw line, and if they had done any better here, again, not to say that they would have still won the game, but to have a disadvantage at the free throw straight, because the Thunder shot 93.3% from there. Timberwolves only shot 70.2% from the line. And they won this by 5. Could you imagine if they would have shot any better? Things could have looked much different for them in this one. As for the Thunder, yes, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander got his 35 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, and blocks on 12 of 26, shooting with, again, 3 threes on 7 attempts. It's a great percentage for him. And if that's something that he's developing, that just makes him even more of an overall threat. And I don't think you'd want to deal with that. Jaylin Williams had 17 points and 7 rebounds on 6 of 16 shooting. Chet Holmgren had 14 points and 5 rebounds, surprisingly, on 4 of 9 shooting. AJ Mitchell added 14 points. Lucius Dort and Alex Caruso had a combined 18 points on 5 of 19 shooting, which is definitely tough for them, including 4 of 16 from 3. It's like, man, even if you aren't expecting some of the other players out there to handle the ball like that, you know that you can bank on them being efficient with their shots. I will say that Alex Caruso was at least aggressive on the glass. His ass had 12 rebounds in this game. Like, even when he might not be playing at his best, that is got to be invigorating for a roster. And that's what helped the Thunder so mightily, right? Even in cases where they weren't shooting that great from the field, they're still out there giving more than 100% effort, regardless of their size, regardless of their skill set. And that is just something that is going to continue to carry the Thunder a long way, especially while he's there as a presence for them. But man, again, 28.2% shooting from 3, and the game was this close for them. Normally, you wouldn't win these kinds of games. You wouldn't even be close to winning in these games, but the Thunder have been in both of these situations now for such a long time. And it's just like, okay, it's kind of second nature for them to just, again, overcome whatever it is you throw at them, to reiterate the same point. Like, it's not that hard to see. Truly. Okay, so for some other NBA developments, Kristaps Porzingis is set to miss at least the next 2 weeks and is currently being evaluated for a different injury per Shams Charania. And frankly, I couldn't imagine what was going on there. I would hope that it doesn't have anything to do with the mystery illness that he was found out to have been dealing with at this time. You would hope that he's not going through that again. And, I mean, you hope that he recovers from this in time. But this is exactly what the Celtics were fearing. And I guess that's why they decided at a point that it just made sense to send him elsewhere. Like, I don't know. When he has played, from what I'm seeing here per Basketball Reference, I mean, 19.3 points this year and 5.6 rebounds on 49.2% shooting and 36.4% shooting from deep. That ain't half bad at all. And I guess overall, the Hawks have managed well without him. But it's just like, when you invest that much in a player, you're going to want them to be out there. So it's like, man, that's just something that you hope gets better with Tom. But I'm not too confident in saying that that is a 100% guarantee that will happen. It's been the theme of his career when it comes to struggling to stay healthy. And that's an unfortunate label to have. These are not things that he can control all the time. Especially when you're looking back at that mystery illness. I mean, you just see that he's struggling to stay on the court and struggling to fucking breathe. And you don't know what's going on. That's something that nobody could have anticipated at all. Not even him. But, the harshest critics will say, well, it's always something for him. And can we say at this point, especially if something is found in these evaluations, can we say that they're totally wrong? I'm not sure that we can. So it's just, man, that's incredibly unfortunate. Trae Young, at a point, was still rehabbing in the G League affiliate per ESPN, and he then returned from his long absence of play Thursday against the Hornets. And in that game, he did not have the greatest outing imaginable. Again, he only played 20 minutes. They were going to have him on a minutes restriction anyway, I assume. 8 points, 10 assists, and a steal on 3 of 8 shooting. Definitely not the cleanest game they had. That didn't stop the Hawks from being competitive, though, as they would lose to a LaMelo Ball, who was also returning from injury and proceeded to hit a dagger on them while having one of the most efficient games he's had in his entire career. I've never seen a stat line from LaMelo Ball that saw him shoot anywhere around 10 of 16 from the field. And he shot 8 of 11 from deep in this game for 28 points and 13 assists. Now, 6 turnovers is still incredibly inefficient. But yeah, that's a great performance for him. Not to mention, he was flanked by Con Neupel, who would also have 28 points, 10 made shots, in at least 6 threes. Brandon Miller was also excellent in this game with 26 points and 8 assists, 3 steals, and 5 rebounds on 9 of 15 shooting as well. That's a tremendous win for the Hornets. But don't be fooled. It's not like the Hawks didn't compete in this one. And again, that's despite Trae Young being this inefficient per se, or just rusty, you could argue. Jalen Johnson is still an all-star candidate. He's very much an all-star candidate, especially with the fact that he had a career high 43 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists in this game. That guy has to confirm it even further. And that's why I voted him in as a starter. Voting for the All-Star game has started at this point, so that he can just cycle through this until like January 14th. All they have is the starters right now. They're not going over any particular reserves or anything like that. And yeah, Jalen Johnson got my fucking vote. I stand on that shit. Truly do. Nickeil Alexander-Walker also had 28 points and 8 rebounds in this game on 11 of 18 shooting. So that was great to see. Trae Young, unfortunately for them, would sit out against the Spurs, and I guess they're trying to see how ready he is for their next action. That game against the Spurs would not go so hot. They would drop that. Mightily drop that. It wasn't even close. And that's okay. They play the Bulls later on, so we'll see if he comes back again for that. I'm not all too sure right now. Ja Morant was questionable with an ankle injury at a point and was doubtful to play for a while. Per multiple reports, I believe that he did play in at least one of the last few games, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, yesterday, for example, they took on the Wizards, and I don't believe, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Ja Morant wasn't in this game. The lone game that he did play in, I believe, which was on, this Wednesday game against the Timberwolves. The Grizzlies actually won it 116 to 110. But, Ja Morant still was nowhere to be found here. You just got solid contributions from everywhere else. And surprisingly, Jaren Jackson Jr. took it upon himself to start actually rebounding and actually being a capable scorer. Okay, yeah. Ja Morant's last action was on last Monday. Against the Clippers, they blew him out. But Ja Morant, again, just not a great game for him in what's been a down season for him. 12 points and 4 assists, but on 4 of 12 shooting, and just a single three-pointer made. It was everywhere else that they got contributions. Cedric Howard continues to be such a great rookie for them. His stock in terms of the rookie ladder with Con Nepal's emergence has probably declined a little bit, but he's probably still very much up there in the rankings. Jalen Wells, the Washington State counterpart, is also a core contributor in this game, as is Cam Spencer off the bench with 27 points, 7 threes as well on 9 of 13 shooting and 6 assists with a single turnover. The Spencer brothers have also been on a tear as of late, even without me, coming on here addressing it as much. I don't really know who would have saw that coming. And again, they'll let you know this was already common knowledge. These guys are lacrosse players getting it done in the NBA. And they're not just hanging on by a thread either. They're actively balling the fuck out. So you gotta respect that. Jaren Jackson Jr. again, 31 points in this one to lead the way with efficient scoring, 13 of 18 shooting and 4 threes. But this one saw him just grab 4 rebounds. It's like, he has to get that down consistently. Because he has the defensive prowess. You know that already. But you can't secure a rebound for me? Come on, man. What the fuck is that? A couple things would happen in relation to the NBA is Adam Silver would take this time to go on a little bit of a media tour to explain some different developments in the league. But all of this, we heard nothing from him about the no-show allegations involving aspiration and Kawhi Leonard and the entire Clippers organization. We didn't hear about anything relating to the gambling investigation still going on. And granted, you probably don't want to ask him those questions if there is a belief that you have a lot of eyes on you in this situation and that you could potentially lose something of value when it comes to that. But at the same time, you're actively covering anything else, and it's not like these cases are going anywhere anytime soon. They are still actively taking place. Wouldn't it behoove you to try to figure out what's going on? That's just me. But there were a couple things here that are important. So the first thing would deal with expansion, and this comes from Tim Bontemps. Essentially, there is a sentiment that the league will consider expansion options in 2026. Per this report, quote, for the first time, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver laid out a definitive timeline for domestic expansion, saying a decision would be made on whether or not to proceed sometime in 2026. And from him directly, I'd say in terms of domestic expansion, that is something we're continuing to look at. It's not a secret we're looking at this market in Las Vegas. We're looking at Seattle. We've looked in other markets as well. I'd say I'd want to be sensitive there about this notion that we're somehow teasing these markets, because I know we've been talking about it for a while. End quote. So I guess, there are going to be different things that go down in terms of, I guess, owners' meetings and everything like that next season, to rehash different things and like CBAs and everything. But when it comes to this, to hear those couple of markets in Las Vegas and Seattle be mentioned, that's not surprising. Do you know how long Seattle has been asking for a basketball team? Since the Supersonics left. Ever since that moment. And I mean, initially, if you think about it, the fans there felt betrayed that they ended up leaving the city to go to Oklahoma City and play basketball there. Yet they still have such a heart and a desire to have a team. They've been clamoring for it ever since. And I mean, bruh, even if you aren't a fan of that team per se, even you have an understanding at this point of the fact that the NBA is just that much better when they have basketball up there in the heart of the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. So why not give that a shot? Las Vegas as well, even as Adam Silver just said right there, it's highly likely, given that you already have this connection here with the NBA Cup. You know how much income they're bringing in consistently, so they're not going to have a problem supporting an NBA team. And they actively have other basketball going on there when you mention the Las Vegas Aces and how they have been successful as a counterpart when it comes to winning titles there in a short period of time. Las Vegas is they're no novice to expansion either. I mean, they are definitely licking their chops. We've still got a chance to see them have a baseball team in at least the next couple of years, if things go a certain way. So anything's on the table there, to be honest with you. As this USA Today article states, essentially this, if it goes down, would be the first time the league would add a new team since the Charlotte Bobcats became the 30th franchise in 2004. And the Bobcats, they've gone through a number of different metamorphoses over time. It's not been the cleanest era for them. Ever, really. But it's still worth a shot at the end of the day. It's probably going to be a little rough. That comes with the territory. The Hornets now have never been able to break out of it, but that's fine. If the NBA can successfully get multiple teams in to round it out to 32, as I've mentioned before, I believe, when covering the probability of expansion, there's going to be a different share of equity in the league. As this quote states from ESPN as well, as I've said before, domestic expansion as opposed to doing a new league in Europe is selling equity in this current league. If you own a 30th of this league, now you own a 32nd if you add two teams. So it's a much more difficult economic analysis. In many ways, it requires predicting the future. I think now we're in the process of working with our teams, engaging the level of interest, and having a better understanding of what the economics would be on the ground for those particular teams, what a pro forma will look like for them, and then sometime in 2026 we'll make a determination. End quote. And I mean, hey, one can understand why it would probably take a little bit. It might not explain the entire process of waiting, but man, with the way that ownership can get across some sports, they want to be very, very conservative with the nature of how they go about allocating their money. And they also want to make sure that there is a reasonable guideline out for just how much they need to expound into an organization to invest in it and ultimately field a capable team. a capable group of overall membership when it comes to staffers and front office members, things of that nature. You got to be able to make the money work. And at the end of the day, right, one of the more valuable leagues out of the Big Four, and generally in the world. So, that's right now, as is. They've been accustomed to it for so long that they have managed to now start to become more of a powerhouse in this regard over the last 2 decades, even if they still may not be competing with the NFL in terms of viewership, and if their viewership might be on the decline. But factoring in 2 extra teams, it can change up the slice of the pie in a drastic way, potentially. Or at least kind of lessens a little bit of the impact that it'll have. And you just have to be able to ready for that. Get ready for that. Because as these expansion teams are new, they're not going to be able to fully support themselves. And we've seen that before with the Pelicans at the time, the New Orleans Hornets at the time, the Charlotte Bombcats at the time. I think with the New Orleans Hornets, the NBA themselves, under David Stern, were funding them in their organization. That's how it can get sometimes. Like, they're just getting started out here. They're not going to be able to self-sustain. And you have to be able to pitch in and contribute to that. Some teams genuinely may not be willing to at first, but again, if everybody's not on board, well, this doesn't work. So that's going to be the key here. I guess a few other cities have been mentioned too. Vancouver has been thrown out numerous times. Mexico City's been thrown out at a certain point with something that I read in covering this in the past. And it's like, well, we'll see about that. We'll see about that, man. Anything's possible there. As for a different note, when it comes to the NBA Cup final, it's been in Las Vegas ever since its inception. However, with some of the things that he said on Tuesday, there could be a shift in that as well. As this article states from Sports Illustrated, quote, via him as well, we're talking with Amazon Prime about whether it makes sense to maybe go to some unique locations for the final game. They have suggested, for example, some Story College arenas, so we're just looking at other ways we can do this. End quote. For one, this is probably something you could have come up with on your own. Did you need to go to Amazon to talk about this? I'm not inherently sure. With that being said, though, that's actually not a terrible idea at all. At all. Some of the names that have been thrown around and even mentioned in this article here are Cameron Indoor Stadium for Duke, Allen Fieldhouse for Kansas, and the Palestra for Penn. I'd imagine you probably get a few different Ivy League schools in that. And there are a number of other locations, even, that might not be as historic per se, that could truly get it done in terms of fielding enough of a fan base to invigorate that much passion and that much hype in an NBA Cup final match. I mean, hey, y'all ain't gonna like this if you are a Dookie, right? But, for example, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that basketball stadium and venue, boy, could you imagine having all those fans line up all around the block just to get into that game and watch it there. It would be tremendous. Or Kentucky. not to mention, as well, with the success that they have had, with the fan base that they have had over a countless period of time, that could be an option for damn sure. I mean, like, even when you think about it in other realms, like, there are some really good venues out there to choose. They don't even mention, I think somebody else did live, but even here, they don't even mention Texas and the arena that they have. Like, you've got potential moves to make there. That could add even more excitement to the thing. Of course, it comes down to viability, and it comes down to working around a sort of schedule here. Because let's say that this move is made, naturally, this will only work if the supposed team that is hosting this is out of town and on the road at that specific point in time. And given what goes into the overall presentation for the NBA Cup, you've got to wait for days just to get different things set up in there and everything like that. You've got to get the court polished and ready for play. You have different media taking place there as well. That stuff can take a little bit of a while. And so you can't just have that space for a day. If you are thinking about this from the league's perspective, you're going to need that for at least a good, I don't know, like, probably 3 to 4 days. So you're going to have to bank on this school going out of their way if it isn't set up already. They're going to have to think about this, and they're going to have to at least plan a road trip of different games, whether it be in conference play, whether it be non-conference play, but you're going to have to spend time away from there. You cannot have that conflict, because that'll pose the ultimate issue. And, it doesn't even have to be anything where it rotates. Well, it could rotate around on a year-to-year basis. It doesn't have to be stagnant. Why just stall it out and make it stagnant at that point? If it performs well enough, yeah, you'd probably want to keep that audience. But when we're dealing with anything related to college, the beauty in college sports lies in just how many different atmospheres you get to experience throughout a full season. It is not just what you see on game day, of course, but that helps a lot. And I think that, a lot of different schools would very much love to have that opportunity to have pro sports played there. It's not like it hasn't happened before as well. I think there have been mentions of different NBA games, generally speaking, being played in different arenas. I believe that there was a situation where last year there was a game that took place in Texas with Kevin Durant playing as well. So it's like, this isn't uncommon. But you'd want to kind of spread that love around to multiple colleges, to multiple universities. You don't want to limit yourself to just one. And just get into a binding contract with them like that. And having it for the final makes sense. I don't think that anybody's even addressed this, and maybe for good reason. But from my perspective, I would think that other people would be trying to make a situation where you have all of the action winding down when it comes to semifinal and final play taking place in different college campuses. And that, if that was on anybody's mind, it's not viable. Because that adds even more confusion completely to have to work around. And then not to mention travel. If it was like close enough to each other, maybe you could get around that. But that's just not something that you would want to be dealing with from that perspective when it comes to transportation. Just get yourself in one area, get yourself settled down, and you can move forward from there. But genuinely, just think about that. Like, there are many others that I probably didn't even name here that could be great options for hosting an NBA Cup. So that is genuinely a good suggestion, and I'd be interested to see how they take it forward. Anthony Davis would be questionable with a calf injury per a report that I got from Fox Sports initially. However, the Mavericks did play last night, and in that game, they would lose. Unfortunately, Anthony Davis is back, though. In this game, he would put up 24 points and 15 rebounds on 11 of 20 shooting. Still shooting three-pointers for some reason, even though he can't make them. That's interesting, but that's not the worst game in the world for him. And I will say, surprisingly, it helps that he's back, because the Mavericks, in general, they have started to turn a corner. Ryan Nembhard has now become the de facto starter at point guard, at least until Kyrie Irving comes back, and he's been doing solid. 7 points and 5 assists, rather. Won't jump off the page for you, but it does get the job done. And how about Cooper Flagg? That Cooper Flagg that was starting out the season, struggling to even get playing time in clutch situations, is now a player who had most recently become the youngest player to score 30 points sometime last month to wind that down. Just recently became the youngest player to score 40 points, or one of the youngest players to score 40 points, and is also up in conversations with LeBron and Kobe when it relates, two players who are, under the age of, well, let me hold on. Let me get myself. One of the first three players, I should say, one of the only three players at the age of 19, 18, or younger to score 500 points in their first few games of action in their debut season. And it's like, damn. There's still things that have to be hashed out for him, but that is a tremendous turnaround. For him, he had 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists in this game on 8 of 16 shooting as well. So that's definitely solid. Also, for this, Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe were able to turn it around and get back to their ways as a duo who was, at a point, the highest scoring one in the NBA. They had a combined 64 points. And VJ Edgecombe himself had a solid outing with 10 of 21 shooting, also adding 6 rebounds and 4 assists. I don't know how Dominic Barlow has done this. What the fuck? 21 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists for him on 9 of 13 shooting. I didn't see that coming at all. But that's solid. So it's safe to say having Anthony Davis back helps. And, they're making the right turnaround, I guess, at a reasonable moment in time. Will that be enough? We'll see. Was reported per multiple reports that Tyler Herro would be out with a toe injury. Karl-Anthony Towns was initially questionable with left knee soreness and would be out for a little while. His status for his next game is going to be up to the coach at that point. He did return to action against the 76ers on Friday in a game that was also on Prime, but did not get an opportunity to watch in real time, yet probably would have talked about in full if I did. He actually was tied for the Knicks scoring lead here with 22 as well, and 11 rebounds on 7 of 15 shooting in a game that they ultimately lost because of B.J. Edgecombe and Tyrese Maxey again being a dominant force as a duo, as B.J. Edgecombe continues his great rookie season. Goodness gracious, like you have to respect that. Collin Sexton would still be out with a left quad strain and has yet to return. Cole Anthony would be out with the next strain. James Harden would be out with a left calf contusion for a while, per an NBA report. But for this game yesterday, he would return, and the Clippers would get the 103-88 win against the Lakers team that did manage to lose Luka Doncic at some point to a contusion as well. For James Harden himself, he had 21 points and 10 assists and 4 rebounds on 6 of 20 shooting. In fact, the game was that low scoring to where neither team shot incredibly well, but Kawhi Leonard, even with him shooting 33% from the field, did have the game lead in points with 32 and 12 rebounds, along with 3 assists, steals, and 2 blocks. So there you go, turning it back a little bit, even in a very unconventional manner. Like, oh my gosh. Okie dokie. LeBron had 36 points in this game, along with 4 rebounds and 3 assists on 15 of 28 shooting, though. Fair enough to have him pick up the slack here. The Lakers still don't have Austin Reeves back yet, and could he have made a difference in this game? Especially with Luka Doncic going down? Yes. 100%. When it comes time for reserves, by the way, you don't want to have all this bias for the Lakers and shit. You just don't. Because sometimes it's unwarranted, but I'm not going to lie. Like Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic. Whether Luka is a starter and Austin Reeves is a reserve, which is probably how it will go, they both deserve to be all-stars. That's just the truth. Like, I'm being serious. There's no bias that comes with that at all. That's just the honest truth. Jaylin Williams the Arkansas Jaylin Williams. Let me be very clear about that. He would be out with heel bursitis. Khris Middleton would initially be out with a knee injury, per an NBA report, but would return for this same Grizzlies matchup against the Wizards last night, in which the Wizards actually managed to win. They had him score just 6 points and 4 assists, though. So it definitely wasn't because of him. She had a number of other people get stuff done. Keshawn George and CJ McCollum both had 28 points in this game, with George adding 7 rebounds and assists just because, on 10 of 16 shooting with 3 threes, while McCollum had 6 threes of his own on 9 of 16 shooting. Alex Saul added 18 points and 11 rebounds, while Marvin Bagley III had 16 points and 6 fucking rebounds. Trey Johnson III also added 12 points and 3 rebounds in 21 minutes of play. That's pretty solid for the Rook, too. Meanwhile, you have Khris Middleton shooting 1 of 9 from the fucking field. Okay. As for the Grizzlies, okay, this is gonna blow your fucking mind. And even I didn't see this initially. Santi Aldama was their leading scorer off the bench in this game with 37 points on 15 of 23 shooting with 5 threes and had 10 rebounds. And you still lost by 8? You still lost by 8. Man, oh my goodness. Even tougher for the Grizzlies as well, they also had Brendan Clark step back in for a little bit. He only played 4 minutes. I believe there was a report that came through and I skipped over. But it mentioned how he was questionable to return to that game with a different injury. Man, the shit just sucks for Brandon Clark. But hey, at least you had Aldama step up in his place. You can't say that for everyone else. it was just, like, they tried. It was close the whole way. You could have gotten some better shooting from Jacques Landale, especially Jacques Landale. 2 of 10 shooting for a center, with most of those shots coming around the rim. Come on, bro. Jalen Walls also shot 2 of 10. That ain't gonna help you get it done. Cam Spencer, at least, despite shooting 7 of 18 from the field, had 19 points and 11 assists with 2 turnovers. So again, continuing a crazy stretch here. Meanwhile, Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't help the cause by fouling out of the ball game, which is typical for him. Despite being a supposed defensive ace, he can't remain disciplined enough in some situations to stay out on the court and have that impact. So it's like, damn, okay. He had 22 points, though, when he was playing, also on 7 of 18, shooting with 3 threes, and he added 8 rebounds. That's okay, I guess. It's a sign, man. Corey Kispert would also be out with a thumb injury, too, and did not play in that game yesterday. D'Angelo Russell would be questionable with an illness, but he would also be in a spot to return briefly in this Mavericks game against the 76ers, which he did not really contribute much to in 11 minutes of play. He didn't score. He got a rebound and an assist and a steal, but he didn't score. They could have used that. They probably could have used that in what was a 7-point ball game. But that's neither here nor there, right? Yeah. Kevin Garnett. Let's talk about Kevin Garnett for a second. Because he's back after years of, I guess, a supposed rift with the organization, which is kind of understandable and, goes into even greater detail than we might have understood before. He is back with the Timberwolves because, as has been stated by Shams Charania and other NBA reports, he is getting his jersey retired at some point and is also joining them in an off-court role as an ambassador to promote the team and just be around the fans generally in a few games to kind of boost engagement, I believe is what this article was essentially alluding to here. And I think that's pretty damn cool. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, as this quote says here, the Timberwolves announced on Thursday they've hired the Hall of Fame member and franchise icon as a team ambassador with a plan to honor Garnett in a jersey-raising ceremony at Target Center on a future date. End quote. It's honestly beautiful. It's been a long time coming for them. Even with me not being around at that time, and even getting into really watching basketball for quite a while throughout the prime of his career and the height of it. Man, the backlash that he got for the move from Minnesota to Boston, even though, again, the Timberwolves literally did it to themselves by failing to contend for all that time and eventually coming up short in 2004, I believe, when it came to them finally being able to break out and contend for the finals, get to a conference championship game. They just had been so fucking terrible throughout most of Garnett's career, and he did not want to put up with that shit anymore, especially if they weren't willing to invest in him reasonably, right? So he goes to Boston and obviously gets a championship there instantly. However, this would be the start of some problems with Taylor. It didn't help that, and that's Glenn Taylor, the former owner of the team. It didn't help that, again, they were not really doing a whole lot of winning while he was there and continued to fall up short over and over and over again. But even worse, as this quote states, Garnett had his first falling out with the Timberwolves after they traded him to Boston in 2007. Glenn Taylor told a local newspaper columnist later he felt KG tanked it by sitting out the final 5 games of a 15-loss season in 2006-07 with a leg injury. End quote. And yeah, you can understand why a rift would take place there. Because just think about this for a second. You drafted this man, Kevin Garnett, out of high school. One of the last players, generally, to get that treatment, by the way. You drafted the man out of high school. He was literally a kid. And he had been grinding it out for that team for years. Even won himself an MVP, I believe, in 2004. Doing it all for them. They called him the big ticket for a reason. Do you realize that? As this article goes on to state at some point, he is the franchise leader in, if I'm not mistaken, they mention he was the leader in points, rebounds, steals, blocks, games, and minutes for this damn team. And they made the playoffs for 8 straight years when he was there. Again, just continued to fall short. But by that time, the Timberwolves had completely fallen off a cliff. And that is general wear and tear that is going to start to take its toll. Essentially, as Garnett was in his prime at that point. He'd been putting it all on the line for you for that damn long. And you, Glenn Taylor, probably never stepping on an NBA court at all. Well, definitely not in terms of playing, of course. But maybe not being in a similar situation. You couldn't possibly understand what Garnett would be dealing with in that situation. And you can't question, at that point, Garnett's faith in the team. You think he would go out of his way to be truly dealing with a leg injury at this point. Was definitely something severe if he's going to sit out. But you just expect him to play through that. Right in the middle of his prime. And potentially risk even more of a severe injury to try to save a season that's already been lost. Like 15-loss season. What would a 5-game difference? What would a 5-game difference make there? And wouldn't potentially tanking, if that's how you strongly felt, like that's just kind of fucking dumb, because wouldn't that fucking help you out to get a higher draft pick if that was the goal? But it clearly wasn't. And Garnett clearly had an issue with that. Not to mention, when we get into this situation, because Secret Base, SB Nation at the time when this video was talked about, or maybe, hold on, let me see, can I find the original video with this? Let me see. I'll go through this right now, because I wonder. Let me see. Okay, well, I guess because they made the move to SB Nation, from SB Nation to Secret Base, in 2020, late 2020 for damn sure. So one of their first videos here as Secret Base, and yeah, this mentioned just how much Flip Saunders, the former coach of the team, was truly the guy that held the glue together in that organization for so long. We very much like to forget that Kevin Garnett was a net, and he'd very much like to. Literally, with him only spending a little bit of time there, he returned and managed to end up retiring there anyways. As this quote states here, Garnett's longtime coach and confidant with the Timberwolves, Flip Saunders, had returned to the organization by then and orchestrated the trade to bring him back, helping bridge the frayed relationship between Garnett and Taylor. But Saunders died of cancer in 2015, and the promise Garnett believed he had from Taylor to buy a stake in the team did not pan out. End quote. So yeah, I can definitely put that video in one of the cards that'll accompany this when I get a chance. Because that video was really well done, and it kind of got into the nature of everything. Like, literally, Saunders, not even having a horse in this race, went out of his way to bring him back, and for a time, they had kind of reconciled. They'd been able to at least tolerate each other, and that went a long way at the time. But that Saunders death, unfortunately, one, affected many people all over the place. That's the main takeaway from this. But when it came to context of the team, oh man, they struggled for a little bit to recover from that, from the mental sense. And it showed on the court. From the view of this relationship, it got fractured. And even as this next piece of information states here, from a quote that Garnett had himself in an interview with The Athletic in 2020, quote, "I'll always have a special place for the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota in my heart, but I don't do business with stakes," end quote. Like, that's just kind of weird from Taylor's perspective, by the way. You actively, I guess, just commit to this sort of peace with Garnett while Saunders is there, but the very second that he leaves the earth, you decide to change your tune completely. That's very fucking weird. And again, Garnett, once more, had a problem with that. Like, that is some pretty shady shit. How are you going to tell me that I'm going to have a stake in this, and then it doesn't end up working out because of something that you clearly control as the owner of the team? That's definitely strange. And it is with that in mind why Kevin Garnett decided to stay away for this long. Taylor himself, honestly, when you think about it that way, I mean, damn, he wanted to be the main guy, the main voice of that team, the main authority. And at that point, that desire to become that just ensured that everybody else and anything else was cut off completely from any kind of support whatsoever. So that just makes him out to be a pretty bad owner. And things, I guess, in the relationship, or the general, I guess, connection with the team took a change when Rodriguez and Lore, that group, came into the organization and started to take up ownership. Then eventually, earlier in the year, as I went over and talked about, they became the de facto owning group of the team, with Taylor moving out. And once that happened, Garnett decided, hey, that little shithead isn't in there anymore. I don't have to deal with Taylor's ass if I make a decision to come back to that organization. Let's give these two a shot. Let's see what exactly we can make happen. Because at the end of the day, I love the team, but I can't. That's what this literally comes down to. At the end of the day, I love the team. He said it. He always will have a special place for that team. But he doesn't do business with stakes. He couldn't stand that nigga. And now he's out. So that gave him the green light he needed. All they had to do was just get different details hashed out behind the scenes. And ultimately, with that in mind, the inevitable will not be delayed for much longer. Like, Kevin Garnett is that much of a legend to where he should have already had his fucking jersey retired by this point, to where he should have already been in a position to at least have some kind of connection with the team and their fan base in a sort of, I guess, official way. And even when that hasn't been the case, between constantly talking about the '08 ring and, having fond memories of his time there, he would not have a problem representing you. It's just dealing with that slummy ass motherfucker. That's the problem. And that was no more. So that should be definitely exciting to see. Some of it is going to have Kevin Garnett engage in different stuff, potentially on social media platforms, I believe. And that's not something that he isn't used to in this new day and age. With his own Instagram account, with his own podcast, and the like. So that should definitely be interesting. Lauri Markkanen would be out with a groin injury, which does hurt, especially considering that the Jazz would very much love to have his services in some of the last few games that they played. Man, these games, some of these last few games have been barn burners. Between losing to the Lakers by 8 in one of the higher scoring games you could possibly ask for, simply because Luka Doncic put up a fucking 45-point triple-double, or literally just last night, as I saw it come through my phone, losing to the Magic by a point in overtime. Like, they have been truly one of the surprises of this season. Yes, they are still on the lower end of teams in the Western Conference as of the recording of this video. 10-17 would put them in a spot where they are the 12th seed. But let me tell you something right now. They've got a different nature about them this season. They truly do. They have competed in most of the action that they've been a part of this year. It's not as bad as it was last year when they were just getting blown out every single game. They're genuinely competing out there. And they've gotten some strong contributions here. Even with giving up 32 points and 6 rebounds to Desmond Bane on 13 of 21 shooting with 3 threes. Paolo Banchero came back and also had a strong game for the Magic with almost a 23-point triple-double, actually, with 9 rebounds and 9 assists. The Jazz have gotten contributions from everywhere, man. I mean, Keontae George is also looking like a player that could vie for an all-star reserve spot in his damn self. He had 27 points on 8 of 22 shooting in this game, but also added 9 assists and 2 steals. Zvi Mikhailuk had 23 points on 9 of 16 shooting with 5 threes. And off the bench, you have Isaiah Collier putting up 18 points and 9 assists, along with a steal on 6 of 12 shooting, while Kevin Love truly turned back the fucking clock. Think about this. Think about this happening in 2025 before we get into 2026. This nigga had 16 points and 16 rebounds. We know he was doing this shit in Minnesota. It has been a while since we have seen a game from him like that. And he shot well too. 6 of 12 from the field. 4 of 7 from deep. Like, they've gotten themselves in a spot where, like, they are no pushover, man. You are going to have to, like, I don't know. You just got to be prepared for anything when it comes to this team. And I think that's what people were banking on last year. Maybe they would be a team that isn't going to contend for a title, but they're going to be damn fun to watch. And it's no fun if you're a Utah fan seeing your team constantly get pounded into the fucking court on a consistent basis. But they are legitimately competing. They're giving their fans something to be excited about. And it's really just about taking that next step. Again, they're the 12th seed. And, when you look at 9, 10, 11, 12, even 8, with the Warriors kind of meddling around right now, like, there's not that much of a difference here. There is a real chance of them being able to contend for a playoff spot this season. They were just completely out of that ballpark last year. So there are steps to it. You have to appreciate that, though, if you are a Jazz fan. In all seriousness. Per report from Shams Charania, and I think insider closer to the situation, Jalen Green stated, essentially, that he planned to be back before the end of December. As we know at this point, he's just been dealing with that nagging hamstring injury the entire time. And yes, the Suns have kind of managed without him. They are currently, as of the recording of this video, the 7th seed in the Western Conference, despite losing to the Warriors yesterday. Still, when he'd been in there, like, he'd provided them with a good scoring punch, man. And, you question whether or not that would work alongside Devin Booker. That question still has to be answered, and that's the point. Like, you just want to have him out there. Get him the reps that he needs. Get him the chemistry that he needs to build with this team overall. Not Dillon Brooks, but the team in general. If they can get that going, they could potentially take another step forward in their overall progression this season. So it would help to have all their core pieces out there, especially a guy that they... When you consider what Kevin Durant is doing for the Rockets right now, you want to be able to have all of the pieces that come with that in terms of players actively contributing. And Dillon Brooks has been outperforming, very much outperforming what the hell he was projected to do in something that still does not make any sense to me. He's actually kept this shit going. I'm just thinking, there's no way he maintains this, and he's still going. So that's something, I guess. But yeah, like, wow. I'm genuinely in shock about that. Genuinely. Okay. Joel Embiid and Donovan Mitchell would both be out eventually. Were initially questionable with illnesses per NBA reports. Oubre Jr. would be out with a sprained left knee and would also be a player that missed the action against the Mavericks last night. Davion Mitchell would be out with an ankle injury. Klay Thompson would be questionable with left knee soreness. Andrew Wiggins would be out with a back injury, unfortunately. And unfortunately for Domantas Sabonis, per Shams Charania and other reports closer to the situation, Sabonis was reevaluated and is set to miss the next 4 to 5 weeks with the same injury. And it's like, oh my goodness. Now, the Kings, man, like, as a result of that, it's just, man, when you have one of your strongest contributors out, I don't care what side of the ball they're on, you're traditionally going to struggle. The Kings are now in a position where, even with how bad it's been for the Pelicans and the Clippers on this side, the Kings are the worst team in the Western Conference. As of the recording of this video, they are a 6-22 squad. And they face off against one of the better ones in the Rockets today. I don't know how well that'll go. What I do like to see, though, is that they'd had the series against the Trailblazers. Or pseudo-series against the Trailblazers. I'm not going to lie, even though they've been losing, and even though it's not been particularly great, they did win against them in overtime, actually. And Massim Renaud, the draft pick from Stanford for this team, has actually been playing relatively well in those games alone. Massim Renaud on this matchup on Thursday literally had 29 points, 11 rebounds, along with 2 assists and steals on 10 of 20 shooting with a 3. Then you get into this game yesterday, and he had another double-double with 17 points and 11 rebounds on, you see the shooting split, 7 of 13 shooting. Like, that's pretty damn solid. And Renaud, honestly, if he can, hash some things out as well, especially when it comes to the offensive end, because he came into this projected as a bit more of a defensive guy Although he seemed like when I was watching him at Stanford, he could do a little bit of everything. Yeah, bro, stands at 7'1", so he's gonna have the center build, and he's playing very well right now. That is a bright spot for them. And that is kind of the beauty of the situation, I guess. You obviously want Sabonis back, and you want him to get healthier. You want him out there contributing to a more winning roster than where we're at right now. But at the very least, you have a chance to experiment a little bit. And I think Reynaud is the perfect guy to hone in on for them right now. It's been working well for him specifically. Now this just has to lead to, again, wins. Like, seriously. The Thunder, like, literally, we're still begging so much for James Harden to try to lead this team back so that the Thunder don't get a top pick next season, and they're struggling to do that. The Pelicans have been struggling to get Zion Williamson specifically healthy for all this time, and they've been struggling for a while, although they do have some promising rookie play as well with what Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears have been able to do. And you are still worse than those guys. Okay. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.